Portuguese. Got it, right, okay. And meanwhile, I'm also looking at my iPad and I'm just checking what I originally said in English while I'm looking at Portuguese. So I hope I don't get too confused for you. So share screen. So the focus today is on research on supporting generalist teachers in the classroom. And by generalist, I mean primary, elementary school teachers that don't have a particular background or specialism, either in music or particularly in singing. There are the three main kind of themes that I want to pick up during the presentation. The first one relates to the nature of children's singing development. What is singing for children and how does it change over time if they have an opportunity to be in a nurturing environment? The second theme relates to the wider benefits of music and the research that suggests that if you're doing music, you may actually be helping other aspects of development. And the third theme relates to the mentoring, the support of generalist teachers by specialists, by those who have a strong background in singing. Right. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the evidence on singing development from research in England and also more recently in China. So you can see here, we had in this slide, there was a program over 5 years in England called Sing Up. And it was a government-sponsored program. And the idea was that every week at the end of the program, children in England should have a good, positive singing experience. And so this program was rolled out across the country from 2007 until 2012. And at the end of the program, 96% of primary schools, elementary schools in England, were participating in the program in some way. And I and my colleagues were asked to evaluate this program. And we did so by taking measurements of children's individual singing behavior. Children right the way across the country, different children at different times. So we had over 11,000 children across the various years of our evaluation. And we collected over 13,000, as you can see their number at the top, of assessments of children singing of different ages. And the ages are at the bottom, children's chronological age. On the left-hand scale, this is plotting their singing ability against two rating scales which were combined to give a total score out of 100. So if we were assessing, for example, professional children singers, as in a English cathedral choir, we would be expecting them to be getting somewhere always around about 100. And if you're looking at children who are not very skilled at their singing, then they're probably going to be scoring somewhere around about 50. Everyone else is in between. And if you look at these trend lines, if you look at the red line is saying that of the children we assessed, as the children got of the different age groups, the older children tended to be more successful, more skilled in their singing than younger children. So you can see the slant of that red line. Now the blue line are measures of children who were taking part in the Sing Up program. So in some way they were getting extra work, extra development on singing. Their teachers were going on courses. They were using a specialist Sing Up website which had lots of extra resources to support the children. And you can see that the blue line is higher than the red line. And what this means is that children who were taking part in the program, the blue line, were on average 2 years in advance in their singing behavior and development than children outside the program. And if you look at the left-hand scale, which is looking at children aged 5, 6, and 7, you can see that those children are more than 2 years in advance, in fact, up to 3 years in advance, so that you might get a child who is age 5, for example, singing within the program with all this extra support and extra development, as if they were aged 8. So the impact of the program we were able to report to the English government, the British government, was that the program was having a real positive impact on accelerating children's singing development. Children inside the program tended to be more skilled at compared with children outside the program of the same age. So we can switch the slide. Oops, too many slides. And when we looked more recently, we've been looking at the youngest children, those aged 5, 6, and 7 plus. We just looked at the data most recently, earlier this year, of 720 children. And we saw the same kinds of trends, but you can see that the sing-up children in that little graph, they're slightly more advanced, slightly more developed, which is also what the previous slide was telling us. So the younger that you work with children, the more likely you are to improve as a group their singing ability. So leaving it until the children are slightly older, age 9, 10, 11, for example, you're likely to have less impact, slightly less impact, than if you work with them when they're younger. And the same key findings that are similar. Right, now one of my doctoral students has been working on applying the assessment tools in China, in Hunan, which is a province, as you can see there in that little map, in southeastern China. And here we looked at nearly 1,000 children, 994 children, made over 1,300 singing assessments over 2 years. And unlike the English model, we actually had 3 songs rather than 2 songs. But we actually see the same kinds of findings. So in the right-hand column, you can see there that older participants tended to be better at singing than younger participants. Girls were more advanced than boys, and those that living in urban centers, which tended to be slightly richer areas, tended to be more advanced in their singing than children living in non-urban, in poorer, more rural areas. Children from higher income families tended to be more advanced in their singing. And there was an interaction between age and income. Children from the poorer families were less developed in their singing, particularly the younger ones. Right, so next slide. So I'm picking up my second theme. Then a major research focus internationally is to do with the wider benefits of singing and music. Now, why might this be? Now, the reasons are, first of all, is that the brain's architecture, so it has an integrated neurological modularity. So we have different parts of the brain that are dedicated to doing different things, but they're all linked to each other. They have connections, special communities of cells. And also the core property of the brain is to do with neuromodulation. That is to say, one part of the brain can influence another part, and also neuroplasticity. And by that we mean that the brain can change and develop over time in the light of experience. So we can see that music is both an individual, but also a social behavior, that we learn to develop musically because of the kind of social experiences that we have, as well as related to our actual design. And you can see here that talking about this neuropsychobiology of musical experience, this distributed system, in the larger image on the bottom right, you can see here the different colors, that different parts of the brain are dedicated to doing particular things, to making sense of the world in particular ways. So the reddish parts are those parts of the brain which relate to hearing, to the perception of sound. Things that relate to the other senses, such as motor behavior, you can see is this black-green band across the top of the skull. Visual centers tend to be at the back. So you can see there are these kind of biases. And in the bottom left-hand image, here you can see that this is a professional singer singing. And you can see in this image here that on the left-hand side of the brain, there's lots of pitch processing and language-related pitch going on. There's also motor behavior here. There's visual imagery going on. And deep inside the brain, as you might expect, singing is an emotional activity. And so the emotional centers deep inside the brain, they also light up. So we can say that on the evidence that our neuropsychobiological design is, we can talk about the human body-mind, this integration of sound. And here we've got the three main systems within the body. So at the moment you're paying attention to me, I hope, by using your nervous system. At the same time, you're having an emotional experience through the activity of your endocrine system. And last but not least, you're actually being kept alive by your immune system. And these three systems integrate. So the critical thing to take from this slide then is that it's impossible to have experiences which are not emotional. And particularly if we're dealing with sound and we're trying to help teachers to sing and teachers to help their children to sing, these are emotional experiences. They're integrated with emotion. So it's very important that singing is a positive emotional experience. And looking at some of the wider benefits of singing, oops, too far, yeah. These are some of the examples. So you've got neurological, psychological, which relates, as I said, to emotion, educational, social, musical, and also physical. And you can see in the examples which are arranged around the outside of these 6, 7 areas, that when we engage in music, there are lots of wider potential benefits which can accrue, that occur because of the way the brain's designed. You can't just do music. While you're doing music, you're also engaged in a physical activity. You're also engaged usually in a social activity, even if you are the audience. It's educational, but also you're actually strengthening connections within the brain. So let's have a look at our third theme, which is to do with specialist mentor support for singing of generalist teachers, those that are non-specialists in elementary or primary schools. Now, as part of our Sing Up program, we looked, and there was a slight, statistically non-significant, but a slight relationship between the way that the teachers perceived themselves as being more competent at singing, that related to the number of sessions that they'd had where they had been achieving some kind of in-service professional development. And you can see there that there's a slight trend line, so that the more activities, the more support that they'd experienced, the higher their sense of self-efficacy in singing, the higher that they sense themselves as being more competent singers. And more recently, we looked at a specialist program in Australia. And if you have a look underneath the little graph, you can see some more detail about who participated. And on the right-hand side, in that column, in blue, you can see our research question, which was what improvements in young children's singing are evidenced following the implementation of the mentoring program for children's primary school generalist teachers. So here we're not measuring the impact on the teachers of the program, we're measuring the impact on the children to see if the program was effective. And going back to the lower part of that graph, you can see that the children were aged 4 to 7 years. There were 11 primary schools, and there were 7 mentors, skilled professional singers, working with 19 mentees or children, teachers who were generalist teachers and not specialists. 292 children, and we had 55 in control comparable classes, compared with 237 that were actually in the so-called experimental classes. And the same measurement system, we asked the children to sing Twinkle Twinkle and Happy Birthday. And what you can see is that whether this program was 20 weeks long or whether it was 10 weeks long, that you can see that those children outside this particular program in Australia, there's virtually no change. That is the dark reddish color. Those children inside the program, trattamento, if I got that right, you can see that there was a significant improvement in their singing. That's the children whose teachers were having this specialist program. And the specialist program worked by the specialist singers coming in and working with the children and working with their teachers alongside them. So that was one example. So now I'm going to move on to something slightly more detailed, but just bringing together this Australian study. Children in the mentor classes made significant improvements in their singing competency. There was, unlike our English and Chinese data looking at children singing generally, there were no sex differences between boys and girls, so that the program was having an equal impact. And the youngest children in year 1 that were age 5, demonstrated the greatest improvement compared with those that were in the preschool or those that were slightly older in year 2, age 6. So we also looked at the levels of deprivation, depending on where these schools were. Some of the schools were in very poor areas, but that didn't make any difference to the improvement level. So if you were working with supporting generalist teachers in a poor area, that didn't make any difference as to how well those children developed. Children developed equally, depending on whether they were living in a poorer area or not, which was a kind of positive message for the program. Now, one of the things that we've been most concerned about in England, and I expect perhaps also in some other countries, is looking at disadvantaged children, children that are more marginalized in society, often living in quite socio-economically poor, challenging areas, that there is an attainment gap in how well they do at school. So one of the questions that we're interested in is whether or not this is an opportunity, looking at the way the brain is designed. If we do music, can we help those children in other ways? And so this led us in our recent English study to look at 3 related but linked challenges. We've got the teachers, and we've got their pupils in these inner city area that we were looking at in London, who had this attainment gap. That is to say, they were not doing terribly well at school in these inner make some kind of improvement in their singing, as well as in other than musical areas of development. And this is just an example, a recent example of what is the disadvantage gap. I'm sorry, this is in English. We couldn't translate this for you. But what do we mean by disadvantage? Well, we have a measure in England that if children are eligible to have free school meals, then this means that they come from a poorer background. And you can see here that the months behind the average in the preschool is about 4 months. So by the time they enter school, children from poorer areas are already 4 months behind. At primary school, this gap increases to about 9 months. So we're talking about 3/4 of a school year. And by the time they get to secondary school, this is 1.5 years that disadvantaged children tend to be behind in their development compared with non-disadvantaged. And some children are persistently disadvantaged. And you can see that those gaps here increase even more, so that we're talking about persistently disadvantaged in our secondary schools are almost 2 years behind in their attainment compared with children who are not disadvantaged. So this is just giving you some English data examples. And this, looking again here, again, apologies for the fact that it's in English. These are what percentage of children reach the expected standard in reading, writing, and mathematics. So if their first language is not English compared with English, there is a slight gap here. And here, if we're looking at boys against girls, so girls tend to be better than boys. But when we look at the disadvantaged groups compared with other pupils, you can see that there is a big gap in terms of reading, writing, and mathematics. And that's similar to whether the proportion of children getting free school meals, that's what that stands for, compared with those that are not. Those children that have some kind of special educational need, as you might expect, are even more behind in terms of their general reading. And this is at age 11. So let's have a look now at this specialist program. When it comes to organizing teaching and learning of music, there is a wide range of different studies, research studies internationally, have reported that generalist teachers, they have issues, they have a problem with their confidence to teach music and to teach singing. They also have problems with expertise. They don't think that they're very expert. They also have worries about how musical they are, their musical self-efficacy. So this project was called Sing Every Day. And it was organized by a professional international group of singers that run called Voces 8. And if you Google Voces 8, you'll find lots of wonderful music that they perform. And they have a subgroup of singers, a separate group called Apollo 5. And we were looking at Apollo 5 visiting over 2 terms some primary schools in a very poor part of inner London. So these professional singers, as part of their working week, 2 or 3 times a term would visit these schools and do some work with the children. And we were looking at the impact on children's singing competency and development, aspects of wider development, and also on the teachers, what the teachers were actually saying about that as well. So our participants were children in what in England we call Key Stage 1. So these were the, in Year 1, which is children aged 5 and 6 years old. They were in 4 classes in 2 inner city schools in an area of London called Hackney, not far away actually from where the 2012 Olympics were held. And we looked at 2 other classes of the same age, but who didn't have the same impact program. And the experimental group teachers and the children participated in the program. So let's get more information about the participants. 63 children in total, and we were able to match data for. And the program finished in central London. The children all came in to central London and did a public performance. Now, the aims of the program were to promote, foster children's singing development through warm-ups, games and songs, and also promote the teachers' development. So the teachers sat in with the professional singers working with their classes. So I just want to, hopefully the video will work, and I'll give you an example of that. See if this works.
The Voces 8 Foundation is passionate about engaging children through singing. We work with schools and communities across the UK, inspiring and encouraging children and training teachers. I'm alive to wait. I'm awake to life. I'm alive to wait. Attended these workshops. They just form their own little band, and I can hear them singing together and just building a positive relationship through these music workshops.
Singing is something you can do every day, and this is especially the case in schools. Our singers work side by side with teachers, supporting them, giving them the skills and the confidence they need to lead singing with their classes.
It's definitely developed my confidence in teaching music to the children. I've been able to model much more confidently. Usually I would use the video and ask the children to sing along. Now I'm able to sing and get the children to copy. Also sort of like in terms of using the different strategies, getting them to use warming up activities to warm up their brain, warm up their body, warm up their voices, and then bringing it all together when they're doing their singing. That's really helped me. So I'm much more confident.
I've seen since we started the project, not only in the singing lessons has their confidence come out, and they're quite confident when they sing or willing to join in or answer questions, but they're also doing that in their literacy and maths and afternoon lessons as well, much more, which is amazing to see.
The voice is part of who we are, and singing with others provides a feeling of belonging. Confident, healthy singing helps promote self-esteem, and we can see the joy singing brings in each and every project we deliver.
And especially in lessons, it's helped so much in the form of just getting them to talk and getting them to sing even more. And then for us as planning for teachers as well, incorporating more music into our lessons, because then we've realised how much they enjoy it.
Members of Apollo 5 lead our London school projects, and these always include a visit to the Vultures 8 Centre.
I was really impressed by how engaged the children were. If you just looked at their faces when the adult singers came in, performing Summer Is A-Comin' In, and you could just see this kind of sense of awe and wonder and wow on their faces, and this professional singing to them. It was really exciting to see that kind of level of engagement. Okay, right. Well, that gives you a flavour of some of the activities that took place. Whoops. Let's move to the next slide. So, what was the impact on the children who took part in terms of their singing? Well, there were 3 schools, and 2 of these were the intervention schools here. And there was one school which was the so-called control school, and 4 classes that took part in the intervention. So this is the average score before they started the program, and this is their average singing score out of 100 at the end of the program. And you can see that in each case, these are 2 classes in the same school, School A, that both improved on average. In the second school, you can see that there is also some improvement, but this particular class made a lot of improvement. In this particular school, the control school, one of the classes made a lot of improvement, but one didn't at all. So we can just generally say, on average, that there was an improvement. Now, one of the other things I just wanted to share with you at this point in the presentation is that there is a program called Sing and See, which is a program created by some colleagues in Australia. And using the program, you can actually see what your voice pitch is doing on a screen. And this was used by me in actually assessing some of the children taking part. And one of the caveats, perhaps, is that using a program to measure children's singing competency may give you slightly different data than if you're just using your musicians here. But incidentally, that I've found this to be a very useful program. And one of our other projects, we've been working with children with hearing impairment. And having this available on a big screen for them in their class, so they can actually see what their voices are doing as they speak or as they sing. You can see the voice pitch moving. Is fundamentally positive for them and very exciting and very engaging. So using technology to support singing is something else that you can do, even if you don't have an ability to actually hire, or the funds to actually hire a professional singer to work with you in a classroom. Now, what about our generalist teachers' development? What was the impact on them? Now, this is looks rather complicated slide. My apologies for that. But this is our observation of one of the teacher's lessons. So this is the lesson, and these are elements of 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So you're looking at a short activity of the children. And you can see here that the pupils' engagement, they were actively participating throughout this session, led by the generalist teacher. Their behavior was, you can see that virtually throughout, only 1 minute they were singing, they were actually using, they were either modeling or actually using their voices to imitate the modeling. Now, what was the teacher doing? These are the teacher's behaviors. Well, the teacher was vocalizing at different moments, then giving them an opportunity to sing. They were using gestures to support the vocalization. They were being enthusiastic, transmits enthusiasm. They were listening to the singing. So they were giving themselves time not just to lead the children, but to listen to the children's performances. They weren't performing or accompanying at all. They also took a moment at the beginning of the lesson to recap what they'd done previously. They also introduced some learning objectives and began to talk about the learning, the singing activity, the song themes in a wider context. They also tried to set challenging tasks, but you can see in terms of their pedagogy, effective teaching methods, they outlined what counted as successful. They told the children in advance what they were meant to be able to do. They also modeled, scaffolded, shaped the space, and they took a moment also to explain. They asked some questions such as yes, no answers, but also more open questions. They provided feedback in different ways. They also took opportunities to ask individual children to demonstrate the learning objectives. And they celebrated the children's achievements in a collective session. So these are just some of the elements that we've discovered over the last 15 years of observing successful teachers in classrooms, not specialists, but generalist teachers who are successful. This is some of the things that successful teachers do in motivating and encouraging and promoting children's singing development. Now, just checking my other screen. So what about these wider benefits? Okay, so we found that there was a clear relationship between children singing, improving, and also these children's reading ability. And we also were looking at something else, another aspect of young children's development, which has become of a lot of interest internationally. And it's something called executive function. And by executive function, we mean this ability to focus on a task, to not be distracted. And one of the ways that you do that is that you ask children to repeat nonsense words, but also what's known as peg tapping activities. So if I tap once, the child has to tap twice. And if I tap twice, the child has to tap once. So you have to kind of remember the rules of the game, nothing to do with music. But what we were seeing was that there was a clear relationship between children's success in singing and their reading, and also executive function. And as we might have expected, there were also links between reading and executive function. And forwards is you saying numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they have to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they have to say it backwards, 4, 3, 2, 1, for example. So these are different aspects of working memory that you're looking at under the umbrella of executive function. And we were interested just to see if working on singing would have an improvement, both in terms of children's general literacy, but also in terms of the way that they're learning, their brain was actually functioning at the time. So let's look at the outcomes. So if we look at this original worry about the attainment gap, for example, the teachers were certainly more confident in leading singing activities with their classes, and they were also more competent. So they felt they were going to be better at doing it, but they were better at doing it. There was evidence that the children developed both musically and non-musically, and these findings are in line with lots of other bits of research. So our research suggests that classroom-based mentoring here of generalists by specialists is effective. The mentoring can promote teachers' self-efficacy, how well they think they can do something, and also their singing pedagogy. And it also has an impact on the children themselves. So you've got a kind of win-win situation here. Right. This is the Oxford Handbook of Singing that was mentioned in the introduction. It's also available online, so you can pick up individual chapters online. If you have any great difficulty in accessing this, then please just let me know if there's something in particular that you need help with. That's my ResearchGate profile. That's my UCL, that's web program. And that's also my email address. And here you can just see some of the many people that I've been working with. Research is a collective activity. Working with a group of talented people enables me to draw on all of those talents and for us to work and support each other. Some of those benefits that you've seen, some of the outcomes are here. And here we've got the 3 ages of Alex. This is Alex last week, now age 9, and this is Alex at his christening. So this also helps me stay kind of grounded. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Graham. I'm gonna carry on with Português. Muitíssimo obrigado, Graham, por essa apresentação estimulante. Eu vou aqui, então, nós temos alguns minutos para alguns questionamentos. A minha sugestão é, quem for fazer pergunta, por favor, clique no ícone com a mãozinha, que eu passo a palavra. Eu não vou estar conseguindo pegar as questões no chat. Então, a gente tem alguns minutinhos. Eu vou abrir, então, para uma pergunta. Deixa eu ver aqui. E quem quiser pode abrir o microfone e fazer a pergunta, que vai ter a tradução. E eu vejo que todo mundo está com os microfones desligados, o que é muito bom. Alguma pergunta, comentário?
Bom dia. Eu gostaria de saber quais são as opiniões ou algumas contribuições de pesquisa também voltadas para adolescentes, se ele tem alguma coisa nessa faixa etária. Obrigado.
O Luiz Gustavo, eu acho que já está sendo feita a tradução por Graham.
Sorry, I didn't quite pick that up. What was the research on?
Adolescente. Okay.
Could you repeat the question?
Luiz, você pode repetir a pergunta? If there is any research about, fala de novo, Luiz, por favor.
Josie, I can't hear you. Are you on mute? No.
Se nessa trajetória do professor ele também fez alguma pesquisa, tem alguma contribuição voltada para os adolescentes.
Did you hear him?
Sorry, I'm still not picking up the last word. Some research on
adolescents, teenagers.
Perhaps put it in the chat. I've got the chat open.
Okay, I can put it here.
On teenagers. Is that the question? Teenagers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
if you have any research about that.
So yes, there is a lot of research on the adolescent voice, and I think one of your other speakers might be my colleague Ginevra Williams, and so Ginevra will be talking probably about that particular age group, or she can if you ask her. One of the challenges, as you know, with adolescent voice is voice change, how the system itself changes. And we, as teachers, we have to be sensitive to the fact that both boys and girls go through voice change. With boys' voice change, the voices gradually get lower, but that change can happen within 1 year, or it may be spread over several years. And that makes it a challenge. For girls moving into becoming women, they tend to lose, first of all, the top part of their register before it then opens up again. So voice range for voice change for teenagers, for both boys and girls physically, is a slightly different process, but they both experience that. And that means that for teachers, you just need to be sensitive about the pitch range you choose for the material that you ask your boys and girls to sing. One of the simplest ways is to begin to do music in 2 parts or even 3 parts, where the 3rd part is an octave below the melody. So that you can, if you start arranging your music into 2 or 3 parts, you'll be able to pick up virtually every teenager in the kind of repertoire that you want to do. And also remembering that these teenagers have their own musical identities. And so we have to work with some of the music that they like, that they see as part of their youth culture, but also we need to expand that by giving them other kinds of musics as well, so that they have a very rich vocal singing education, music that they can identify with, but expanding the music that they can identify with.
Okay, I think Luis is also wondering, thank you. I think Luis is also wondering if you have done any research with this particular group. Hello, I'm not sure if, can you hear me, Graham? Hello,
I see.
Graham, can you hear me?
The program in schools, yeah. Well, the main issue that you usually have is teachers' confidence. And so the introduction of this kind of program, whether you're doing it in school or whether you are working with teachers separately, is that you give them activities, you give them vocal activities, you give them games. You want the teachers to play with their voices, and so that they can then play with their children's voices. And the simpler the activity, the more likely you are to be successful. So you start off with lots of vocal activities, with rhythmic activities, with, you could do beatboxing if you wanted to, you know, whatever, yeah. But you make the learning fun with lots of simple activities and games, with playing with little bits of rhythm, little bits of pitch, playing with question and answers, with improvising using your voice. You do something, they have to do something. It doesn't matter what they do. And gradually you begin to introduce song material, but the song material also tends to be, it will be children's songs, but don't have the pitch range too big. Keep a limited, and then you can play at transposition. So you can have a song in one key, and then you're going to move it up or move it down, because you will have children in your classes who have slightly bigger voice mechanisms and who like to sing a little bit lower, and who also perhaps like, some of them might like to sing a little bit higher, and that can relate to ethnicity. For example, in England, we find that children from South Asia, from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, in English primary schools, they tend to be smaller. And because they are smaller, they have smaller mechanisms, and their voices tend to be pitched a little bit higher. Whereas we find, for example, other ethnic minority children, such as Black and minority ethnic, if you like, Afro-Caribbean heritage, they tend to be bigger, taller, and so they may well have bigger mechanisms, and they may prefer things pitched a little bit lower. So that's why when you're introducing a song, you try to do it in different keys. And it's easier if the pitch range is relatively limited, so you can move the pitch up and down. This is our starting pitch, da 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 da. Now this is our starting pitch, da 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 da. So you can let the teachers play with their voices and with the ingredients.
Okay, obrigado, okay. Graham. Thank you very much. Desculpem, mas infelizmente não temos mais tempo.
Jose, when you speak, yeah. I can't hear you for some reason.
You can hear me.
Because you're being translated. No, don't worry about it. I've just worked it out. You're speaking Portuguese, and someone is
translating to English. Yeah. I'm saying that I'm afraid we don't have time. That's the last question, and I'm not sure if someone is translating. Ok. Eu vou passar a palavra para Viviane e quero antes agradecer muito o Graham por estar com a gente hoje, sábado de manhã, sábado à tarde para ele, encerrando o segundo seminário do Musipex. Eu passo a palavra então para Viviane, mais uma vez agradecendo muito o Graham pela generosidade de estar com a gente
My
hoje.
pleasure.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
José, obrigada, Graham. Que alegria, Graham, receber você aqui hoje com a gente. Eu vou falar em português porque o Felipe está traduzindo aí para você, está interpretando, né? Mas uma honra, uma alegria muito grande por toda a sua trajetória. Eu acho que a gente no Brasil, assim, te acompanha, né? Há um longo tempo, assim, a sua trajetória tão bonita como pesquisador, como professor, todas essas contribuições que você traz para a área de educação musical de um modo geral, e não só, né? com todo o trabalho que você desenvolve, especialmente a componente humana que você coloca, Graham, em tudo que você faz. Então, muito obrigada, é muito bom te ouvir, é muito bom conhecer mais o seu trabalho. Então, eu tenho certeza que todos aqui nessa sala saem daqui hoje, desse fechamento do seminário, com uma alegria muito grande e com uma satisfação mesmo, com o nosso muito obrigada, realmente, assim, por tudo que você partilhou conosco hoje, nessa sessão. Muito obrigada. José, quero estender também aqui. Quero estender os meus agradecimentos, José, a você. O José, gente, para quem não conhece, é professor do Núcleo de Educação Musical da Universidade Federal de Uberlândia, é o meu colega, foi orientando, do Graham no pós-doc e outras experiências aí de trabalho com o professor. Tem tem um trabalho riquíssimo como professor, como pesquisador. Então, assim, José, muito grata por você estar aqui hoje também mediando essa sessão, fazendo esse fechamento com a gente aqui do seminário do Musipec, e agradecendo de antemão por todo o apoio, que não só você, que é do núcleo, tem dado as iniciativas que a gente tem feito no grupo de pesquisa, mas os colegas como um todo que não puderam estar aqui hoje, mas que sempre dão essa força, e estão juntos no desenvolvimento dessas ações, que eu acho que é o que o Graham falou, trabalho colaborativo, os pesquisadores juntos, os professores juntos, acho que é isso que vai fazer a diferença. Então, muito obrigada a você também, José, por estar aqui com a gente.
Eu que agradeço o convite. Muito obrigado.
E para fechar, gente, infelizmente nós não temos tempo, então, para mais perguntas. Nós vamos ter que encerrar essa sala, porque essa sala é da equipe dos intérpretes, tá? É um Zoom específico com esse globinho ali para tradução, para interpretação. Então, eu mandei para vocês já por e-mail um outro link para a gente fazer o fechamento agora com o lançamento do livro, do primeiro seminário do Musipec que aconteceu no ano passado. Então, eu vou encaminhar para vocês também aqui no chat esse link, porque se alguém não acessou o e-mail, consegue também já ter acesso aqui agora, tá? E deixar o meu muito obrigada a todos vocês que se inscreveram nesse seminário, que estão aqui participando conosco desde ontem às 10 horas, Obrigada mesmo. E convido vocês a ficarem mais uma meia horinha com a gente na outra sala, para conhecerem um pouco desse trabalho, do grupo, do livro e tudo mais, tá? O fechamento vai ser rápido. Obrigada, Felipe, Apolo, pela interpretação, pelo apoio em todos os sentidos. Musipec, tá? E a gente se encontra daqui a pouquinho. Graham, thank you so much. See you soon.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done. Thank you. And thanks to the translator.
Thank you. Pessoal, o link está aqui, tá? Também no chat. Quem quiser já pode copiar e aguardem que eu já vou abrir outra sala. E muito obrigada a todos, de coração. Abraço. Tchau, Graham. Bye.
O link já está no chat? Acho que não
tá no chat, tá? Não receberam? Vou enviar de novo. Um minuto aqui. Foi?
Agora foi.
Agora foi. E tá no e-mail também, tá, gente? Eu vou aguardar.